All right, everyone, thanks again for stopping by the Brownells booth. It's a pleasure to have everyone. My name is Ryan Rett. I'm the head of communications for Brownells. I'm joined by Paul Levy on the far end with Brownells, Russell Fagan from KEArms, and of course the familiar Ian and Carl from InRangeTV. So we have some pretty cool announcements today we'll share with you. All right, thanks to Carl for producing the video, and actually he didn't put in audio. The audio just didn't work, so it was nice to stand in silence for a couple minutes. But we have our own audio man, Paul Levy, here, who's going to give you the whole rundown of what's going on, what's new, and then we'll have commentary from everybody else. Paul?
Sure. So starting off, we've got the BRN 180 products. You're familiar with the upper receiver. New this year, we've got the lower receivers to go with it. So we've got, right here we have the BRN 180M, and that's a billet lower, AR-15 styling, like modern stylings, hence the M. And it's got a Picatinny rail built in, so that accommodates braces and folding stocks nicely, so it can function with the stock folded or in the open position as well. And we do have another version that many of you will be excited about, right there. Thank you, Ian. So this is the BRN 180 lower. So this is stylized after the original AR 180. It's a forged receiver, but again integrates the Picatinny rail, so you can attach a folding brace or stock. You may notice this stock right here, thanks to V5, they developed this stylized after the original AR 180 stock. So it's super thin, folds to the side nice and cleanly, and obviously honors that original 180 design and styling. So that's new for Brownells, the BRN 180 lowers, so you can check out those today on our site. And then also on our site, we've got the What Would Stoner Do 2020 gun, which I'll let these fine gentlemen discuss.
Take it away.
Testing. All right. So hi, I'm Carl from InRange. And if you want to see that video with audio tomorrow, so you can get the full effect on that. But so we have Ian here holding the prototype version of the What Would Stoner Do 2020. The 2017 build that we came up with actually originated when I was traveling for a match, and I picked up an original Colt SP1 and started shooting it, and I'm like, what happened to the AR-15 that we went from something that was modern materials, lightweight, handy, and accurate, to these beasts that we now carry today? And we've seen this through a lot of military adaptation processes, where something that starts off good lands up somewhere different. And the AR, I feel, in a lot of ways has gotten to that point. So we started focusing on the most modern materials and the ideas that Eugene Stoner tried to epitomize when they downsized it with Jim Sullivan into the AR-15. Polymer lower, carbon fiber free float tube, pencil barrels, which are now viable again, and coming in with a gun that is completely accurate, reliable, doesn't shift zero at under 6 pounds with an optic. So Ian, do you want to add something to that?
So there were a lot of elements in the original AR-15 that were good ideas that didn't work because the technology wasn't there at the time. So the pencil barrel is a perfect example. The barrels that Colt was making in the 60s didn't have the heat treating that we have today, and so when they got hot, the zero would shift in unpredictable directions. We've got a great Faxon barrel in here that doesn't do that. It gets hot, the group enlarges, as one would expect, but it stays in the same place, and that allows us to go back to a very lightweight pencil barrel instead of being forced to put in, something big like an M4 profile barrel just to try and keep the zero in the same place. Our polymer receiver is actually designed from the ground up to be made of polymer. It exploits the material properties of polymer, which is in many ways superior to aluminum if you design for it. So this lower flexes. If this gets hit by something, if it gets run over by something, it will bend and it will come back, unlike the permanent deformation you'll get in aluminum. In order to accommodate that, we redesigned the lower, well, we didn't, this goes back to KEArms and then GWAX, integrated, in fact it actually goes back to Colt, who experimented with this in the 70s, integrated the pistol grip, the buttstock, the buffer tube, and the lower receiver all into one contiguous piece.
So Ian touched on a couple things that are really interesting. Way back when I was using an old Mark II lower, and we had an event, actually Fagan was using a Mark II lower, and I was using a traditional AR-15, and we were at a competition in which someone accidentally ran over our guns with a truck. And my gun was destroyed. The buffer tube mating assembly cracked. A lot of things on the traditional AR-15 aluminum lower failed. And the Mark II lower bent, went back into shape, and was actually functional after that traumatic event. And so one of the things we hear about with polymer lowers, which Ian touched upon, is that when you look at a polymer lower, that a lot of people just take an AR-15 lower and make it out of polymer. It's not the right idea. It has to be designed for the material in mind, which I think is something that you would have seen Stoner and Sullivan do.
There are, in addition, a whole bunch of subtle features on this that I don't know if we have time to go into all of them right here, but we have carbon fiber handguard, reduced weight, reduced heat transference. We have fully ambidextrous controls on the rifle. We have a slightly beveled magazine well for quicker reloading. We have sling points back on the stock. We have an ambidextrous gas-shielded charging handle on it. We have a unit captured buffer assembly, so you don't need a buffer retention pin that, not often, but every once in a while, snaps off, falls into your trigger, and makes the gun stop working. We have a KEArms SLT trigger in there, which is both a fantastic trigger pull. You guys will be welcome to try that out. And a 45-degree safety lever, and you can engage that safety whether the gun has been fired or not fired. One of the weird quirks of the AR fire control group originally was if you've dry fired the gun, you cannot engage the safety. And a lot of people will rationalize that and we can do this with it. But in reality, if you can always engage the safety, that's a superior system. So the one thing that we were never able to do with this on video is convey just how nice it is to handle a 5.5-pound rifle that balances like this. You can't see that on video, and I'm really excited that now we have a model here that we can show you guys, and you can get that perception yourselves. So this is, of course, a 3D printed lower because our mold tooling is not complete yet, but it's built from the exact same solid model file that we used to build the mold tooling. So.
Just everything that's going into this is making use of all the knowledge we've gained almost 20 years working with monolithic receiver design. I was at KEArms from 2001 to 2010, and I'm really glad to be able to bring this product back to market under KEArms today.
All right. Paul, do you want to talk about availability on these, on all the products?
Sure. So this will be, so the What Would Stoner Do 2020 rifle is available today for pre-order on Brownells.com. That's going to be shipping here later this year. The BRN 180M low receiver is available right now on Brownells.com. You can order that today. And the BRN 180 low receiver, the forged version, stylized like the original 180, that's going to be available here later, but you can pre-order it today on the website.
Just to clarify, I may have a reputation with pre-orders. How much money do you take from somebody who pre-orders?
So this goes for anything from Brownells. We don't capture your money. We don't charge your card for a pre-order. So you will only pay when the product actually physically ships to you. Good point, Ian.
Woo!
Any questions right now? We'll also be available here afterwards if you want to ask any questions one-on-one afterwards. All right. We have these two gentlemen.
So looking at the lower receiver, it's made to use a carbine buffer and buffer spring. I was curious why you chose to use that as opposed to a A1 buffer and buffer spring.
So the earliest KEA-15 Mark 1s, we didn't even call them that at the time, used a rifle buffer and spring, but they didn't have enough reinforcement ribbing behind the buffer tube assembly. So those early models would have the buffer and buffer spring beat their way out the back of the receiver. So all that reinforcement ribbing you saw on the 3D model is necessary for the durability and longevity of the receiver.
The thickness of the polymer at the rear makes a big difference. When you're dealing with polymer, you have to build it like. When you're dealing with a different material like polymer, you have to deal with polymer, and so having more rigidity at the rear of the stock allows for what Fagan said, to make sure that you don't have a failure point when using the buffer system.
Also, what kind of polymer are you guys using for that? Are you using like a nylon 6 with glass fill and fill, or what kind of polymer are you actually using? What percentage of glass is it, and stuff like that?
So it is going to be a glass-filled nylon 6. The exact percentage to be determined. We're doing mold flow analysis to determine which percentage will work the best and weld the best with the new mold design. Traditionally, they were 30%. We're looking at potentially higher percentages to increase durability, but that has some trade-offs. So we're doing everything we can to design this the right way out of the gate and make sure that it's going to be durable and hold up for tens of thousands of rounds. The original Mark II receivers lasted for 50,000 plus rounds, and I personally, and there's no reason they shouldn't even last. So with the Mark III, we're exploring some other options, but worst case scenario, we'll go with tradition because 30% glass-filled nylon will work and hold up for a very long time for this application.
Oh, is that going to be Q1 or Q2 production?
Q1 or Q2 production? There you go, 2. Yes, we'll have black and tan.
Flat dark earth.
And flat dark earth, I'm sorry, not tan.
Same thing.
Yeah. Any other questions? We'll be hanging around here for a while too.
Will this be utilizing capture takedown pins?
So the takedown pins have the springs and detents built into them. There's a couple reasons for that. The first is that drilling those small holes for the traditional springs and detents for takedown pins is a high scrap rate area in production because the drills are small and can walk out the wall of the receiver. The second is those holes formed for the traditional AR-15 takedown pin spring and detents become fail points in the polymer. So in the oldest KEAv-15s, they would crack through that rear pinhole there, right through the spring and detent hole. On the front, it would just cause a cosmetic issue or it would break out in the outer wall. So the reason we're going with pins with the springs and detents built in is twofold: reduce scrap rate, and secondly, to increase longevity and durability of the part.
On that note, once again, we're dealing with polymer, and you have to design around the material you're working with. But like when you look at the HK designs in which the pins weren't necessarily retained, you would use this the same way. Pull the pin out, take the lower off, put the pins right back in the lower. You're not going to lose them. They're not retained, but it's also not a problem as long as there's just a tiny modicum of discipline in your maintenance of the gun.
Brownells sell spare pins?
Yes. And just a reminder, there are media kits available with Roy. Roy, could you raise your hand? So he has media kits right there if you want to snag a USB drive.
Do you guys have any plans to switch different lengths of poles with the stocks in the future, and maybe different angles to accommodate those lengths of pole for the actual grip?
So let me answer that from my perspective as a shooter, and then we'll get to Fagan about the technical elements of it. So it was funny, this came up a lot with the What Was Done to Do 2017 project, in which everyone was like, the non-adjustable length of pull was kind of a problem for them. And I understand that there are times and places where that is a benefit. But when we started doing real looking around and analysis, so we go to this 2-gun match or our brutality matches or anything else, and be like, everybody bring your ARs out with all of the whiz-bang buttons and adjustable length of pull. And we lined up, I'm not kidding, 10 of them. And with the exception, I think, 1, they were all A1 length. Like, it turns out you can adjust it all day long, but when you're done, it almost always is A1 length. So this currently is A1 length, but there's some other plans afoot.
So the stock is actually set up to accept any A1 or A2 butt plates. So if you want to make it longer, there's already a number of systems on the market that make that possible. So I know there are some taller guys that they want to have up closer to a 13.5 or 14-inch length of pull for comfort. But for most people, like Carl said, the A1 length works well. The other thing is there are some options for aftermarket modifications potential that people have done with the previous generations of receivers to reduce length. It's not necessarily something we're going to endorse, but it is possible. For anyone who is skilled at doing grip or stippling reduction style work, the receiver will lend itself to those same kind of operations.
Will it support 1/2x28 attachments?
So 1/2x28 attachments.
So this Faxon barrel is the one with the permanently attached flash hider, and that's one of the ones we showed in the video where we're demonstrating the heat stress test. But we ultimately looked at what we were doing and tested a number of different barrels, and for the reasons of modularity as well as keeping the same weight profile, we're actually going with the 16-inch threaded Faxon pencil barrel with a detachable muzzle device. So it'll be capable of handling suppressors or whatever muzzle device you want. And we're currently looking at, and probably are going to go with, an alternative modern material for the flash hider. Titanium is what we're looking at currently, and we're working with KEArms on that. Do you have anything you want to add? No.
So it will be a 1/2x28?
Correct. Yes, it will be.
Yes, sir.
on that note, are you looking at different barrel profiles for suppressors in mind, or are you going to stick with pencil for it?
Nope. Just pencil.
Are you guys passing that rifle around?
We are now.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? We'll be circulating around, so.
I'll be available, so.
All right, there you go, Paul.
All right, thank you, everyone. If you have questions, snag one of us here afterwards. We'll be happy to answer and take care of you.